Here I go. For the colony and for oppressed ants everywhere.
No, I can assure you there is nothing wrong with the video itself. In fact, that is actually how the game presents the footage. And also, yes, I am actually going to be reviewing a video game. But not just any video game. This is a video game that will still be around my wheelhouse as it is based on an animated movie, specifically Disney and Pixar's A Bug's Life for the PS1. Now, before I go and look into the game itself, I just want to go and have a quick mention about my thought on the movie. And I've already reviewed this film many years ago, and I just want to say that my thoughts on it still stands to this day, where even though it's not necessarily the best Pixar movie out there, like it may not have reached like masterpiece level as some of their other films, or especially some of the films that would come out after that. But still, though, as is, it is still very solid. And even for being one of the first computer animated features, it is still very well crafted. It has a lot of great humor. The world building is very admirable. The characters are very charming. The animation, like even with the limitations that they had at the time, it's still great. All around, it is still very well made and very enjoyable to go and watch. And there is, now going back into the actual game in itself, it's actually quite funny when I received this as a Patreon request to go and review, because coincidentally enough, it all really worked out, because not only do I still have my PS1, but also I actually own A Bug's Life for the PS1. Like, I've already had it in my collection for the longest time, probably for as long as I had my PlayStation, in fact. So I already had all the materials to go and actually create this review. So it was one of those cases where it all worked out when I was requested. But then when it was time for me to actually go and work on the review itself, well, first of all, I had to go through a little bit of troubleshooting, because you got to keep in mind, again, I've had the game for as long as I've had the PlayStation, and I've had that PlayStation for most of my life. So you can imagine that this Bug's Life game that I own specifically, it is old, and not only that, it is very used up and very scratchy. Even when I tried to initially go and play it, oh boy, did it have a lot of trouble, and patching was very much needed. So before I even started playing the game, I had to go and use the toothpaste technique in order to go and like patch up some of the small scratches that it had. And eventually I did get it working. Now, there were a few things that it did struggle with a little bit, like with the company logos of who made this game specifically, with Disney Interactive and Traveler's Tales, which on a side note, by the way, this was released around the same time as the game came out, and not only was it released on the PS1, but also it was released on the Nintendo 64, and there was another company that made a Bug's Life game for the Game Boy Color. But going back to what I was talking about, yeah, my game had some struggles with presenting those company logos. And on top of that, there are some times when it struggles with the audio when it comes to playing some of the voiceovers, or even playing some of the music at the same time as I would be playing the game. But other than that, it still runs very smoothly. It still managed to work out, and I was still able to go and experience the game in itself. So I thought that would also be worth mentioning, just in case, like to give you a full idea and to be transparent with my experience. All right, so with that said, now it is time that we shall go and answer the big question: what is A Bug's Life on the PS1? Because I know many of you are very familiar with the movie, but maybe not necessarily with the game itself. Well, I'm just going to go and tell you right now that if you have seen the movie, well, then you do have an idea of how the game is. Because like many movie-based video games, it's pretty much a translation to a different medium where they pretty much took the entire plot line of the movie and they really condensed it so that they would go and turn it into a video game where there are certain levels there are levels that were inspired by certain scenes of the movie in order to go and create itself. And in the case of A Bug's Life on the PS1, basically you go through these different levels that are based on a few scenes in the movie, and every time you would go and complete it, the most common reward that it would go and give you is very condensed clips from the movie. Like, again, you got to keep in mind, it is the PS1, so the way they presented the film itself is not in the highest quality. I would even say nowadays, it is pretty comical to go and watch something that's not even standard definition. This is like more closer to potato definition than anything. But still, though, like, I'm not gonna go and criticize it too hard on it because this very much is the PS1, and for its time, it actually does serve the job pretty well. It's just funny to see how it is nowadays. Like, just like a comical nostalgia to see, like, oh, that's considered good quality back then. But you know what? Like, I'll give it a pass. That's just like a funny thing to go and notice. But yes, that's essentially the big goal with the entire game of what you would go and do. And what is very interesting with A Bug's Life for the PS1 is that, or the video game in general, because I'm sure it's the same thing with the Nintendo 64, is that there are technically two ways that you could go and actually play it. The first one is that you can go and play it straightforward. Just do the story mode from beginning to end, and you could just go and play that. And I'll just say right now, it's surprisingly a short game. And when I say that it's surprisingly short, I'll say that for my playthrough, it took me about 4 to 5 hours to go and complete it entirely. People who are more experienced with A Bug's Life video game, they would be able to go and finish it off in like 3 or 4, just to give you an idea. But then at the same time, like, you could just play it straightforward like that. But then there is also another way that you could play, which is to go and fully complete it, like to go and finish it off 100%. And that really adds an extra layer to the gameplay itself. Mainly because while you would go and do your main mission, you would also on each level have to go and collect 3 tokens, which requires you to do some extra, I wouldn't say exercises, but do some extra missions on the side as you would go through the entire level, and something that requires you to go and fully explore each of those levels. In each level, there are 50 grains that you would have to go and fully collect. And when you do collect all 50 grains, it actually grants you full health. Like, after you reach number 50, you'll get not only the token, but you'll actually receive full health. No problem there. And then there is the second collectathon thing, which is to go and collect the 4 letters of Flick's name, F-L-I-K. And those are a little harder to find, as you could imagine. So when you go and collect all 4 of those letters, you not only get that token, but you also gain an extra life, which can be very helpful in this particular game, and I'll explain why. And then there is the third one, and this is a mechanic I'll explain pretty soon, but this is when you go and grab the gold berry, and not only that you have to grab the gold berry, but you have to go and destroy other bugs. And that's also another thing that I just want to go and quickly mention is that, yes, there are a lot of enemies in this game, and basically they are literally any bug that isn't an ant like Flick. So yeah, Flick kind of has a prejudice against anything and everything. So whatever he sees that's different than him, he'll just go and take a berry and just try to eliminate him, or quite literally just throw a few berries and they will blow up into pieces. So yeah, Flick has a bit of an antagonist side. You know what I mean? But anyways, back to what I was talking about. With those gold berries, you have to go and destroy a certain amount of enemies, and then you would receive another token. I don't know if it gives you an extra bonus afterwards. I didn't go and I didn't really go out of my way to go and collect those, but yeah, essentially, if you want to go and really 100% everything, like not only to finish the entire game, but also even collect all the movie clips that you could go and gather, you would have to go and get those 3 tokens on each level, including the boss fights, by the way, which I will say they are pretty fun and creative. And even though this is a pretty short game, it is fun to see how they designed it all and how certain characters in the movie can be a boss, rather it be the grasshoppers such as Hopper, Molt, and Thumper. And then, of course, you also got the big bird as well. And then right in the middle, you have to fight against the Thugfly in the bug bar. So there is that as well. And yes, even in the boss fights, there is also that extra layer where you have to go and try to complete everything, where you have to go and get the gold berry in order to go and hit the enemy or the boss a few times. You also have to go and spell out your name, FLIK, and also collect all the grains as well. So yeah, there is kind of that extra layer that you could play within the game. And like I said, those are the 2 major ways that you can actually go and play. Either straightforward and go through the game pretty quickly, or you can spend more time by trying to go and collect everything while you are still in the game, and pretty much encourages you to go and explore every nook and cranny onto everything that is in there. And even before the game starts, you can actually have the option to go to the tutorials, in which they call training, in which they introduce you to all the main concepts of how you can go and use your attacks by throwing berries. You can jump, you can ground pound, introduce you to some of the game's mechanics, like the seeds or some of the tokens, which I will be explaining later, and also all the things that you could go and collect, like the grains, the letters in Flick's name, and even the importance of the gold berry to go and take down enemies. Again, I'll go and explain further after a little later. But one criticism that I will say right now, because this is a multi-platform game that it was available for the PS1 and for the Nintendo 64, it is pretty vague in terms of some of its explanations. This would have been a game that would really benefit if you would have some kind of description box that would literally write out what the characters would go and say, and to point out which button specifically to use in order to go and activate whatever you want to do, whether it be jumping or attacking. But no, in this case here, it took the lazy route and tried to vaguely explain it without mentioning any of the buttons. They would go and say, oh, you would have to use the throw button. Oh, you got to use the jump button.
Keep a few around by hitting your throw button.
Meanwhile, at the start of it, when I started playing it, it was pretty much like a case of trial and error, where I'm just randomly pressing buttons until I know which ones to properly use, or to feel like I know what I would be doing. But over time, however, with with a few shots of the training mode, I was able to understand a little bit more about how it does work and knowing which button actually works. So yeah, the learning curve might be a little bit big, but eventually you will get there. But that's not the only thing that you can do. Those are the only things that you can go and actually collect in A Bug's Life, because there are also these special little tokens to go and upgrade your seeds. Now, berries aren't the only thing in your arsenal. From time to time, you will go and encounter some seeds that will go and help you along your journey. And with those seeds, you could go and jump on them so that they could become some special little platforms or special little extra equipment to aid you. And they will give you a wide variety, and sometimes they will give you a lot, or sometimes they'll give you a handful, depending on the levels. There are some that will give you an extra platform to go and bounce on, or to go really high to go and get into some hard to reach places. There are some leaves that could get you some extra platforms. There are little bulbs that can get you some nice little bonuses like temporary invincibility, some health, or even like a shield or an ability like a super jump. There are some cannons that you could get to help out to get rid of a swarm of enemies. And there are even some berries that, like, you could go and collect the purple tokens in order to get easier access onto the gold berries. So there's a wide variety that you can go and have, and sometimes they can all be at the same time. That does add that extra layer of strategy within the game itself, that you could go and pick and choose whichever you want. And even if you got some that would be upgraded, you could also go back a little bit if you want to pick a specific one to go and aid you along your journey. And there are some that they're not at the max level, but they will help you out in a variety of ways, such as the flower propeller to go and not only like get you into higher ledges, but also if you want to grab a seed and you want to move it to another place, or like move it to a higher area that you cannot reach because you can't jump while you're holding a seed, you could just go and throw it at the flower so that it can move it up for you. Another example, there is like one bulb that can gain you some health, and even though that's not the max level, it can be very useful that if you're stuck in a sticky situation, you could go and quickly regain your health and continue your journey without worrying about losing your life. So there is that you can use during that whole time. And again, it adds that extra layer of strategy that you could figure out which ones that you can go and use along your journey, use a variety of them to go and help solve puzzles, or to get you closer to the goal. So there are those extra layers of that game mechanic that does require you to go and think and strategize and to be a little bit creative in terms of getting rid of enemies, or to go through some pretty tall obstacles at the same time. And when it comes to the look of the game itself, when it comes to the actual graphics, yes, I am aware that this is the PS1. So, I mean, compared by today's standards, yes, it does look very primitive. But I gotta say, for a PS1 game, this actually does look very impressive. I gotta give credit to the people at Disney Interactive and Traveler's Tales that they actually did a surprisingly good job at recreating the look of A Bug's Life, like the whole aesthetic of what A Bug's Life has established, like this whole well, not utopia, but this entire world of that is mainly for bugs itself, like making like average life just so supersized. And especially when they go into different areas, like rather it be like on the ant hill, or like where the ant colony is, or like when Flick goes to the big city to find the circus bugs and stuff like that. It does look pretty impressive and also pretty colorful at the same time. Not to mention all the different bugs that are in there, where some do have that same style as within the movie, that maybe like they didn't appear there, but they do look like they come from the film. And there are some characters that, yeah, their roles would be like extras in there, but they look exactly like they do in the movies. So recreating that style, I think they actually did a pretty solid job. And I would even say that it does look as immersive as it does in the film as well. And then there's also the music that I do want to add. And yes, there are times that, from my experience, because of my old disc, it doesn't play all the time, and sometimes it could struggle to do so. But then afterwards, like, I would go and actually listen to them a little more carefully on YouTube just to get a better idea of what they are. And I gotta say, the soundtrack of the Bugs Life video game is honestly pretty boppin', I gotta say. Okay, yeah, I know boppin' is kind of a weird word, but it's actually pretty cool. Like, it's something that I feel like you can jam with. Now, I know that technically it's not the same soundtrack as in the movie. And I mean, yes, it is very common for movie-based video games to have a completely different soundtrack than the ones from the feature film. But the one that they used in here, it's actually pretty fun. Like, it has this massive jungle vibe to it, but it does work out in order to go and capture the mood of each of the scenes or each of the levels within the game. And sometimes, like, they can help you get into the mood and, like, get ready to be, like, a bit more intense when things get a little bit more serious, or when you are more closer to fight against Hopper, or when you do go and fight against a boss. So if you just go and take a listen to each of them, you know, I will say, for a video game soundtrack, especially one for a movie-based video game, it's actually, you know, it's not that bad. It's, you know, it's actually a pretty nice one to go and listen to. Maybe not like awe-inspiring, not like amazing per se, but, you know, it is still like something to casually like listen to and have a decent time with it. There is just so much about this game that is built so well and has a lot of potential to be pretty awesome. Like, so far, like with the game mechanics, with the whole concept of how you could play either straightforward or to go and complete it, and even in terms of like the whole aesthetic of it with the graphics and the music, like everything is set up to actually be this pretty fun, and I'd even say an awesome movie-based video game. Well, it would have been if it weren't for one serious problem that honestly ruins the whole thing. And oh yes, like honestly, I would hesitate to say that this is even a good game, because once you start actually playing it, that's when it all falls apart. And I just gotta say, my biggest gripe, my biggest issue with A Bug's Life, the video game, has to be the controls. I don't know if it's as bad on the Nintendo 64, but playing it on the PS1 can honestly be quite a nightmare. And let me just tell you that when it comes to the controls, like right off the bat, like even when you go and immediately notice it, oh boy, is it slippery. It like Flick is so slippery within the game all the time that honestly there is a part of me that is convinced that this is not based on A Bug's Life, the movie. I feel like this is more based on the Disney on Ice version more so than anything, with the way that Flick would just keep slipping around. It doesn't matter what the floor is. Like it is pretty much permanent ice physics that is all scattered around in the world, or at least in this world of A Bug's Life, which does make it pretty difficult to keep on controlling Flick. And not to mention that when it comes to running and jumping, oh boy, good luck trying to do that, because I will tell you, for the most part, that's one of the trickiest things to actually go and do. And it happens more often than not when it's not even responsive. I honestly feel like maybe Flick doesn't know how to go and do both at the same time. Like, he doesn't know how to run and jump. You have to go and select either to go, you got to run, or you would have to go and make a jump. Because several times, and more often than not, like what would screw me over is that I would try to do running and jumping like from one platform to the next, but I would end up falling over, and then I would have to go and retrace my steps to go back in order to try to do that again. Oh my God. Like honestly, that's where a lot of my time is actually spent. And especially with the fact that this is supposed to be a 3D platformer, the fact that you're not really able to go and run and jump, that can honestly be quite a serious problem. Now, bad controls are one thing, and the fact that it can be very slippery, yes, it can be an issue within itself, but then the situation gets even worse when you add in the camera. Oh my goodness, this camera is so frustrating, because this has got to be one of the most stubborn cameras that I had to go and handle within a video game. It doesn't want to go and move around. It really just wants to focus wherever it wants. And the fact that it remains very close to flick, like, it honestly obstructs you from anything that would potentially be around you. Now, yes, I am very well aware that there are ways that you could technically control it, but the controls, however, like, even if you want to try to do so, like, best of luck. It barely is functional, and it's barely, I would say, like, it is almost useless with the way that you cannot just like do whatever you want with the camera. Like, it is so asinine, because this is one of those games where you can either control the character or you could control the camera. You cannot do both whatsoever. And with the combination of those two, that is the reason why there are numerous of occasions where I ended up losing a life again and again and again. Mainly because of the fact that it obstructs you from whatever could be off screen. Like, you can't just go and look the other way to go and check out what could be possibly like right beside you or anything like that. There could be some obstacles that could go and suddenly hit you, or there are some enemies that are off camera that are ready to go and attack you, and you wouldn't be any of the wiser. And it's because of that that there are certain levels where, yes, you will go and lose a life again and again and again until you would reach a game over. And oh my God, does it really punish you when you're at the game over. Yes, it does play that little clip of Hopper telling us that
You just lost.
but then afterwards, you see that game over screen. It doesn't just send you back to the main menu. Oh, no, no, no. It sends you even further. It sends you all the way back to the logos. Like, it's almost like the whole game kind of resets itself. Like, the only thing it doesn't do is go all the way back where you would see the Sony logo and the PlayStation logo. Like, once you get a game over, after that game over screen, you would have to go back to the beginning where you would see the Disney Interactive and Traveler's Tale logo. Then you would get that opening scene from the movie. Then you go back to the title screen of A Bug's Life. And that's not all, by the way. Then, once you do go back, you have to go and load your game again, which, on a side note, it is crucial that you have to go and save every time you go and beat a level, because trust me, like, this is one of those games that's very much dependent on your save file. But back to what I was talking about, yes, you do have to go back to the load and save screen, so that you have to go and load your game back, so that you have to return your level and start the level all over again. It pretty much punishes you for wasting 1 minute at least of your time whenever you would go and get a game over. Now, at this point, you would think that, okay, in this case, if you want to go and avoid that kind of situation, then you have to go and collect some one-ups along the way, right? Well, yes, it would be wise to go and farm up on some one-ups just in case. And I know technically some people may point out that yes, there is a cheat code where you can go and gather up like 99 lives. Now, I tried to do that, and honestly, it is pretty impossible to do so because one of the buttons that you got to do is with the X button, and that is the thing that activates to go and whatever you're on, whether it be any of the levels or the options or the bonuses or anything like that. And by the way, I do want to go and mention that when it comes to getting stuff like healths and one-ups, in terms of health, I think the game actually did pretty well with that. It's actually okay with the kind of mechanic that it did. Yes, you would have to go and get 50 grain in order to get full health, but there is also the case that one of the upgrades that you could get from your seed, you can also have it be to shoot out some health whenever you go and need it. And also, on occasion, when you defeat an enemy, they will give you an extra health as well that can help you along your journey. But when it comes to one-ups, however, the only way that you can get an extra life is by collecting the 4 letters in Flick's name. That is it. There is no extra ways that you could go and actually collect those one-ups. It's always just with the FILK, and that is it. And if you're stuck in a situation where you would keep getting game overs, it could be very frustrating because, like, at this point, it's pretty much mythological to even get a one-up. And trust me, I just want to go and state right now that I know that like theoretically, you could get all the one-ups you want if you're aiming to go and fully complete the game and get all of those 3 tokens, since one of the tokens immediately gets you a one-up. But because of these frustrating controls, because of that terrible camera, honestly, it's just not worth it. Even if I would be curious and to try that out, I wouldn't even want to. I would be at the point where I would just feel so fed up that I just want to go and finish the level and just move on to the next. That's it. Like, honestly, it's just a concept that after trying to handle the controls, like the idea of trying to complete the game 100% just gets thrown out the window. So yeah, all in all, this is to pretty much go and say that if you want to go and actually stock up on one-ups, then unfortunately you have to go and do it the hard way by spelling FILK. However, there is a way that you can easily farm one-ups, and that is actually through the training mode, considering that in there, it does teach you not only about all the mechanics and stuff like that, but you also get all the collection things that you can go and grab, like all the grains, so that you can immediately go and be at full health again, or especially that you could go and collect all the letters in Flick's name so that you can get a free one-up. It's actually the easiest way in the game that you could go and get a one-up without resorting to using cheat codes or anything like that. But there is one massive catch, is that to get a one-up, you have to go through the whole training again and again and again. And honestly, even if you know everything, even if you want to like literally speed through the entire game, honestly, it actually takes you about 2 minutes to go and finish through everything just to get a one-up. And if you want to go and farm it, you're going to need some extra time in order to go and keep repeating the process again and again and again, where you have to learn to like repeatedly jump, to repeatedly throw things, and repeatedly hear the guy keep on saying
Jiminy Cricket
with everything that you got to do. So trust me, it gets repetitive real quick, so that the rewards can be very little. Like, even just trying to go and get like 5 one-ups just to be safe, like for the next levels that may be to come if I end up losing a lot of lives and stuff like that, it took me about 10 minutes. So yeah, even that kind of preparation, like there is that extra layer of frustration because of the amount of time that you have to waste just to get something that is as simple as just an extra life. But honestly, if I had to point out what would have to be the worst thing about it, it's not just the terrible controls. It's not just the horrible camera. Like, there are ways that people could technically work around all of those things. But to make matters even worse for everything is the type of game that this is. For the most part, it is a non-linear scavenger hunt. That's the best way that I could go and describe it. Now, not all the levels are like that, but I would say most of the levels, even some of the boss fights, can actually be like that, where you have to go and find certain things in order to go and complete the level. Now, rather it be to go through some complex maze to go from point A to point B, or you have to go and find some specific characters, or you have to go and find specific parts for that mechanical bird, or even looking around to find the boss so that you could throw your berries at them. Like, honestly, it's one of those that, yeah, like they will go and make some, like I said, a complex maze just to go through this entire level. And it's the kind that you're free to go and like explore all around. It's not really the kind that is linear. Now, there are a few levels that are linear, and I feel like the problems with the camera and the controls are not as much of a problem during those levels in particular, because, you know, considering that the layout of it all is pretty limited, thus making it not as much of an issue with the camera or the controls, because it pretty much is more direct to tell you where specifically that you would have to go. And for me, those would usually take like 5 to 10 minutes in order to go and complete those levels. But when it comes to those that are way more 3D, that are a lot more open space, that are meant to be like really worth exploring all around, oh boy, they take me a while. Like on average, I would say, give or take, they could take me like 30 to 40 minutes to go and complete each. And on top of that, by the way, one thing that this game seriously lacks that it honestly desperately needs is a map. Oh, it does not give you any map whatsoever. And because of that, the grand majority of my time with this game is not just with wrestling with the controls. It's not just to wrestle with the camera to make it look at specifically where I want to be, especially when there is a sharp corner. But at the same time, I would easily get lost and try to figure out where I am. And that's where most of it, like most of my time would have to be with this game, is just to figure out where specifically am I going? Well, like, do I know where where is it that I'm going? And not only that, but even like my anger can sometimes get the best of me while I'm playing because of these controls. Like there are times like not only that I have to go and like try to gain some control onto Flick as he keeps slipping and sliding and keeps falling down off of ledges and stuff like that, but also I have to try to figure out where I am specifically and try to figure out where am I supposed to go. Yes, there are some little telescopes that you could go and grab so that it could show you where you would have to be, but they don't really serve that much of a help whatsoever. And that's why it's just so easy to get lost within this entire game. And from there, it really does take away a lot of time from actually playing the game itself. Because when it comes to like I said before, like just wrestling with the controls, wrestling with the camera, and trying to figure out where you have to go all at the same time, it takes time away from what you're supposed to do, which is to go and find the collectibles, which is to go and fight the bosses, which is to go and get to the right direction. Like it really takes away so much of it because you have to go and deal with the problems. And from there, it makes the experience so frustrating. And like I mentioned before, that's the thing that honestly prevents me from wanting to go and complete this game entirely. I don't care if there are any bonus levels that they would go and offer. I don't care if like there would have to be a lot of things that I have to go and collect. I don't care if I would have to go and like try to grab all the movie clips so like I could complete that little collection there. Like, it's at the point where again and again and again, I just end up being so frustrated with the time I would lose and with the lives that I would lose, that I would also lose in so many unfair ways, that it really just all boils down to a pretty frustrating experience. It kind of makes me pretty thankful that the game is, or at least the main game in itself, is already very short as is, because continuously spending more time with all that, it just makes it not fun. I mean, like, with all the ideas that they would go and present, and even with the work that is done on the presentation of it all, with the graphics and the music, they don't necessarily mean much if you cannot play it in a way that is actually controllable, in a way that is actually fun. And it really is because of those controls, and with the actual mechanic of legitimately playing the game, it just sucks out all the fun and all the potential that this could have had in order to be a pretty fun game. So overall, when it comes to A Bug's Life, the video game, specifically for the PS1, I would say that it is almost a good game. I feel like it has just about everything that you could think of in order to make a pretty solid game in itself, one that is actually well thought out and one that actually looks pretty well crafted, that it has all of these great ideas that can actually be something that it wouldn't just be fun to play, but actually have that extra layer of replayability so that you could try and try again in order to go and fully 100% complete it. I actually do like this mechanic of having those multiple ways of playing it, rather it be to be more straightforward if you just want to have like a quick playthrough in order to finish it in one day, or you could go and actually collect everything to make the game last longer and to go and fully 100% it to get all the grains and all the letters in Flick's name, or all the movie clips and stuff like that. And even in terms of the presentation with the graphics and the music, like, I feel like all of this actually does work out well. This would have been one of Disney's better video games that they have developed, but it's just the controls that honestly ruin it. When it comes to actually picking the game up, when it's time to actually move Flick around, that's when everything honestly feels like it all falls apart. The controls are just absolutely slippery. The camera is just so fussy to go and work with, and especially with the type of 3D platformer that it is, in which it is more non-linear, and it doesn't give you what you need in order to go through the game, such as a map. You spend most of the time either fighting against the controls or fighting against your direction to know where you're actually going, especially with the way that the game can constantly be vague about what you're supposed to do with it. It ends up sucking out all the fun that you could possibly have with this, and it just really spoils the mood. It just turns out to be a moment that it gives you more frustration than actual enjoyment. Like, it's on, and I would even say that, like, the more I think about it, the more that it's additionally frustrating how close it is to actually be a pretty solid game. Like, there's just so much of it that almost feels exactly like you're experiencing A Bug's Life, the movie, but it's just those controls really do take away. Like, if they would have fixed the camera where you would have the freedom to control that, or if they would go and fix the controls to make them a lot more tight, or if they would go and actually give you a map to give you an idea of where the fridge you are in like whatever level that you're in, this could have honestly been a much better game. Like, there's like, honestly, it's crazy how there's just a few things they could have done to go and like fix up, and it would have actually like greatly benefit. Like, it would have been something that like would have improved the game so significantly. But without those, honestly, it all just really falls apart, regardless of how all the other factors are well crafted. So if I would go and give this a rating, honestly, I did think about it and like to weigh in all the different pros and cons. I think I'm gonna go with a 5 out of 10. It really is that massive of a mixed bag because of like everything that it offers, like all the other things, again, from the graphics to the music to the concept of the mechanics and all that kind of stuff. They actually work out great, but the things that don't work, they're just so frustrating, down to the point where I don't want to go through that again. I don't want to re-experience that anger of trying to make Flick move or try to make him work in a platformer, because even as a, like, this is supposed to be a platformer, and yet the controls prevent it to make it work as a platformer. So that's why, like, those little factors, they are so bad that they could really make this fall apart. And not to mention that this is something that, to be very honest, I would hesitate if I would go and recommend this to anybody to go and play. Like, maybe if you are a big fan of A Bug's Life, maybe you could go and give this a shot. But I'm just warning you right now, if you want to go and play it, like, feel free to do so, but don't say that I didn't warn you that there is going to be at least one moment or two that you are going to get frustrated, that you are going to get fed up, and you'll feel like maybe like doing those extra things might not even be worth it. So yeah, honestly, it's one of those games that I would say that there are a lot of good things about it, but proceed with caution, because some of the main aspects of it being a video game, oh boy, does it need some serious work, and that is a generous way of putting it. And with that said, that should do it for this review of A Bug's Life. So I just want to go and give out a huge thanks to Chris Estrada for his amazing support on Patreon, which got him this review of A Bug's Life for PS1. And I just want to go and quickly mention that if you would like to be like Chris and you want to go and support my work and get some amazing rewards, including but not limited to seeing my videos before anyone else, then all you have to do is go to patreon.com/animat. And also, at the same time, if you did enjoy this review, then don't forget to go and hit that like button and subscribe to my channel. Now, it is rare that I would go and review video games in the first place, but also keep in mind I am more of an animation guy. So if you want to listen to me talk about a lot of animation, and especially animated movies, then come subscribe and join in the fun with me. And so, with all that said, I would like to say thank you all so much for watching, and until next time, see you later, dudes.
Have you been playing all summer? You think this is a game?
No, please!
Well, guess what? You just lost.